All right, everybody. Welcome to the Lawrence Douglas County Joint Metropolitan Planning Commission. Today is January 22nd, 2025. Happy New Year to everybody. Becky, to go over the rules of tonight's meeting, please take the floor.
Thank you. My name is Becky Pepper, and I'll be helping to facilitate the Zoom video portion of this meeting. I'm going to work along the chair to do that. Before we begin, I do have a few housekeeping items for this hybrid meeting. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and cable channel 25. Please remember to mute yourself during the meeting when you're not speaking. Unless you're participating during the meeting, please turn your video off. This allows the active meeting participants to be seen on screen. You will still be able to hear the meeting, and when you are participating, please turn your video on. If you have any trouble, you can send a chat to me. The city reserves the right to mute people or turn individual videos off to minimize distraction during the meeting. With those, I will send it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Becky. Starting our regular agenda, do we have any questions on the minutes from any of the commissioners? If not, can I have a motion?
Move to approve them.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, that's unanimous.
Abstain.
Oh, you
Yep.
abstained as well. Sorry.
And
Two
myself,
abstains.
yep.
Okay, sorry. Jeff, you got that?
Yep.
Okay. Any reports, Commissioner Thomas, from the Planning Organization Policy Board? Nothing. Okay. And Jeff, do you have anything to add on the Land Development Code update?
For the steering committee, just to let you all know, that code was adopted on 14th? Yeah, 14th. So
Thank you.
per their resolution, the Land Development Code Steering Committee does not exist after that one, so the resolution resolves them after the code has been adopted. So the code is through second reading, and it'll become effective on April 1st. And just so you all are aware, there's other things that we'll be doing in the meantime to get that stood up and operating. So you'll see some other things going to City Commission that will be repealing other codes and some other sections that come through that relate to the current Land Development Code. But you'll be also seeing a text amendment coming back for the new Land Development Code probably in the next month to do cleanups and things that we've identified in the time that has passed since you last saw it. So April 1 will be the new effective date of the new code.
Sorry, I misled you. It was November 12th,
November.
not 14th. Sorry.
Thank you. And is the steering committee dissolved, or is it? It's dissolved. Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. All right, Jeff. Any written communication from the public?
We did not receive any for this meeting.
Thank you. Any communications from staff, other commissioners?
No, none this evening.
Okay. Any waiver requests made by the city engineer?
Also none this evening.
Okay. Commissioners, any ex parte communication? I see none. Any declaration of abstentions? Not seeing any. All right. General public comment. Is there anybody online, Becky, that would like to say anything?
Does not appear to
Okay.
be any no.
And I'm assuming you're not here to say anything general public comment, right?
No.
No, but if there was another matter that was heard by the planning commission, this is the question. Can I ask for feedback? I wasn't here at that meeting, and I'm going to reintroduce it. And I was just curious if I could do a Q&A, or if that's just...
You can't do a Q&A, but you can just state your question, and then maybe afterwards we can meet with you after the meeting one-on-one or something like that.
And it's something that probably staff would probably be able to help with at
Staff
that
could
point
probably
in
help.
time, considering the commission would be hearing an item potentially in the future and may not prejudice the item.
Okay. So do you want to say something about it? You have 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Just tell us your name, and you have 3 minutes.
I'm Corby Rust with Land Plan Engineering. And you heard a rezoning on 3rd and Michigan. 301 Michigan is what we called it. It's just west of the hospital. And part of the property, if you'll remember, was zoned RM24, and I think part of it was RS7. I was going for RM32. Well, I've just resubmitted that for RM24 for the entire property. And I just wanted to get feedback, somewhere along the way, if that looks promising or if it's going to be a problem.
Okay.
So that's all I wanted to ask. I talked to planning today, and they had kind of mentioned that there wasn't a lot of optimism the last time it was in front of the planning commission. So I just wanted to kind of see what direction I should head.
Thank you. This is in your court, Jeff.
Yes, staff would be happy to have that conversation.
Okay, thank you. All right, so with that, and nobody's online, so we're going to go to our first agenda item, the Honorable Sandy Day.
Wow. You've been watching too much TV.
We are in a court, right?
No, we're not. Let me be clear about that. Okay. Kurt, I know it's in here somewhere.
Green button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. It'll say share, and then your PowerPoint should be, maybe it's not green, sorry. Hold on, let me help. It is green now, there you go, and it's Monterey Gardens, right?
Yes.
Here we go.
I'm moving the mouse and you're moving the mouse.
Beginning of this, and all right, you're up.
Okay, thank you. Sandy Day Planning. The next two items we'll do a presentation together. It is for a rezoning and for essentially it's a revised preliminary development plan. The Planning Commission did consider this property in a number of different aspects previously. This slide is intended to highlight for you where we're talking about, which is the southeast corner of Monterey Way and Peterson Road. This is part of the Fall Creek Farms basic subdivision area. We approved this area, the bulk of it, to RS5 with a PD overlay. I think that was in 22-23 time period. We had an approved development plan go through the process that both this body and the City Commission approved. And then the applicant stepped back to take a little bit more refined look at this property as well as the unplatted portions and ended up revising the boundary of the planned development. So that's really the reason that this item is back in front of you this evening. And then there's been a series of rezonings. There was taking some property out of that planned development and returning it back to just conventional, I think it was RS10 zoning for this area to the south, and a little piece over here that was approved, and that is working through the process to be reflected on the zoning maps. But a requirement of a planned development is that you must meet a certain amount of open space within your project. That's not a variable item. So that required the applicant to rethink the boundary, to add in property to be able to meet that open space piece. And as a preliminary development plan, it also functions as a preliminary plat. So there are two variances that are associated with this project as well that are outlined in the staff report. One is about the right-of-way for Peterson Road, and we've talked about the fact that arterial streets in the subdivision regulations today require 150 feet. Most of our existing arterial streets do not meet that design standard. That's one of the things that's on the list to come back and look at that. There's no proposed plans to improve or widen Peterson Road, so that is a technical variance that's associated with the plat component of this project. That's a variance. And then the other variance is related to the lot sizes themselves. The requirement to meet all of the base district lot size and density and dimensional standards for that base zoning district. This is something we actually overlooked in the original approval, so it's a variance in front of you this evening to consider a variance to reduce the lot frontage for a few lots, and that again, that's part of the subdivision component of the development plan. This slide is just highlighting right now, if you looked at our zoning maps, you'd see the image on the left with this boundary that kind of extends out. This is part of that pond that got clipped out of the project, and this blue area is the piece that's getting added back in. This is a piece that got clipped out, and it will come back when we see the subdivision plat for the balance of Fall Creek Farm. So there's lots of moving parts within this. Just a couple of key points. You'll see these points listed in both of the staff reports. The property is in Tier 1, so it's already in that urban growth area. We have looked at this project as an infill project. There's no approved sector plan that goes along with this. It's really part of the continued vision of the Fall Creek Farms development that really goes back to the early 90s. There is minimum requirement for open space, and that's the significant driver of this project affecting the boundary of the project, and why it has to come back both with the rezoning, because you have to have that open space, so it needs the PD overlay, but we also had to amend the boundary of the development plan, so that project had to come back to this body as well. Next couple of slides are just the review criteria for the rezoning, the conformance with the comprehensive plan surrounding zoning, all of kind of our standard components that we look at. There's nothing new or surprising about this. The development criteria, again, this body has actually approved this project. The interior, the bulk of the project, the lots, the private street configurations and orientations, where open space is internal to the project, access, all of those components are exactly the same as what this body considered a year and a half ago. It's just a quick slide of the project. I think the technical land area is actually just a little bit bigger. I meant to pull up that number and forgot to check that before I came up. The RS5, again, that's that same base zoning that we're talking about. Right-of-way, no change. Access easements and private streets. The project will extend a driveway up to a property that is located on Peterson Road. It's not part of the development, but that was a requirement from the Fall Creek Farm. So this project is implementing that agreement. The number of lots has not changed. What we do see on the preliminary development plan is kind of a configuration of what the house footprints might look like. When the final development plan comes in, we will not be looking at those footprints. This is really an exercise to make sure that all of these lots are buildable. So if somebody wants to put building B on lot 30, they can do that as long as they can meet those setbacks. So this is just an exercise to make sure everything's buildable. It is. It's compliant with the front, rear, and side setbacks. We went through a couple of iterations with the applicant to make sure that we got there, and they did. This slide is just highlighting where those variances occur. They occur generally around the curves of, this is an eyebrow, cul-de-sac eyebrow, street configuration. What happens is these lots are a little bit narrow at the actual frontage piece. They are wider back at the setback, so they're able to be reasonably developed, and that was the significant issue with that. So 8 of the 50 lots have this variance, and then you can see some of it's pretty small. The minimum requirement is 40 feet. Lot 9 is 36 feet. One of them drops down to 31. So they're all pretty close, but they all definitely meet that at the setback. Right-of-way variance, as I mentioned, they have the 50 feet of right-of-way ultimately that will be dedicated through the plat process, and then there is 15 feet of easement in addition to that. So there really is no question for the city engineer and city staff to be able to have the necessary infrastructure improvements within the public right-of-way. Staff's recommendation for the zoning is for approval. This would add this property into the planned development overlay. Staff's recommendation for those variances was also for support. And for the development plan, staff has also recommended approval of the development plan. There's 2 conditions. That's really getting some technical information to satisfy the stormwater engineer. He is wanting those minimum elevations to be documented. We usually see that on the final. He's just wanting to have some additional kind of assurance. So that's a piece of information that we will get with this project. And then there was one other condition, and that also was for the city stormwater engineer. So that's more on the technical side, just kind of dotting an I and crossing a T. I'm happy to answer any questions. The applicant is here if you have any questions for him.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
Would you like to add anything?
The only thing I will add is this, in our company has a 2021 project number, so it's been about as well thought through as it's going to get. There was a lot of changes along the way, and I think we've arrived at something that we all agreed at. And a lot of challenges with the slope, with the stormwater, with who owns this, who owns that, and what needs to happen further with the Fall Creek Farm plat that is eventually going to be submitted probably within a week. So I think we're here. So I'll be happy to answer any questions as well.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Becky, did anybody make it online, or are we still quiet?
I don't see anyone online for public comment.
Public comment, okay. I'm going to bring it back to the commission, unless I hear a voice, which I'm not expecting. Anyway, all right, so it's back to the commission. Do we have any questions for the applicant or for Sandy? Go ahead. Please go ahead.
Sandy, I'm struggling with the question of this one, of what is infill development. Because I understand infill development to be land that's vacant between already developed properties. And I've looked at Plan 2040, and in the staff report, it's page 4 of 8, as well as 10 of 38. It cites the prioritization of growth and development that's in Plan 2040, and there's a reference to page 38 of 2040. I think that reference is intended to be 28. But then further down in the next paragraph, it says the plan prioritizes infill development as a key growth management practice. I couldn't find that anywhere in 2040. I could find that 2040 says that it accommodates infill development, but the prioritization is for growth and development, not infill. And I wondered if I was missing something.
I'm looking over Jeff's shoulder, wondering if he's quickly searching the code language. Whether or not the word choice is explicit, I think the intent of Plan 2040 is to fill in those areas that are within the city limits already, which this project is. It's been in the city limits since '95. I think the new code, I think it tries to clarify what infill development is in a more finite manner. This project is not reviewed based on the new code. It's based on the code language that we have, where this kind of project has, in my 30 years here, this would have been considered infill development. It has development all the way around it on all of the other corners. It is been a lengthy time for Fall Creek Farms to finish out its development. That is on the developer, but they've had the preliminary plat originally approved. I think that goes back to 95 or 96.
I guess I've thought of infill as trying to fill, not trying to rezone, but just trying to do whatever the neighborhood or area plan is without making a change. And I think that the fact we've got a rezoning here indicates that it's a change in pattern and development, and that's why it's not really infill. The only reason I'm concerned about it is that I don't think Plan 2040 prioritizes infill. It certainly doesn't say that anywhere. I do think the new development code does, but we're not worrying about the new development code here.
We're not.
So I wanted to be very careful about that language, and when we were looking at the staff finding number 1, I would want to approve the rezoning, but just delete the sentence that says the plan does prioritize infill development,
On,
because I think that's inconsistent.
On page 21 of Plan 2040, it notes under 2.1 that Tier 1 land is prioritized for development at any time. The intent of 2040 was not to specifically get into neighborhood by neighborhood discussions in that point. It was to talk about the city as a whole. So the
Right.
intent of the steering committee at that point was to prioritize infill with the land inside the city limits before annexing and expanding. So in the case of this one is, yeah, I would say it is an infill development project, and it is up to an applicant to choose to rezone or put forward an application at that point in time, what they want to do with the application. But the intent of 2040 was to emphasize and use the resources that were already invested in the ground for stormwater and sewer and any other number of utilities first before annexing and expanding those. So under the context of 2040, it does meet that infill intent that it does have.
Okay, so infill is not just a question of buildable, what's buildable, but it is a question also of growth and development.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I guess maybe this is something for another meeting, but I guess I see what you're saying with the definition of infill development. I always thought of it as a little bit different and not a broader just developing. So I'd be interested in putting that on a mid-month or something to have more conversation about that.
Yeah.
Because there is a difference between prioritizing development and prioritizing a particular type of development. And so what I hear here is that it really is just prioritizing, or that infill development is just development. And so I'm not quite sure then that my prior understanding when I heard the term infill development is correct. So I'd love
Yeah, I
more
agree.
conversation about that.
I think that would be great.
Okay, I have a question for Sandy. Sandy, so this is a planned development,
It is.
ED. So the roads are private?
In this application, they are private.
When we go to April, does that change at that point? Do the roads then become, what happens to the roads at that point?
They will still be private.
Okay, okay, so the management of the roads are by the owner of the...
Through the homeowners association.
Okay, thank you.
Had the city been trying to discourage private streets? Because it's not unusual for the homeowners along a private street to say, well, we didn't know that these weren't public streets. We can't afford to do this. And so please, city, you need to take them over. I've heard that on more than one occasion.
Yes, and so has staff.
Yeah, I bet you have.
That would be one of the very early conversations staff had with the applicant about doing this project with public street. The difficulty of that is that they would not be able to get nearly as many lots with a public street profile than with the private street profile. And that is because they can build the street. It still has to be built to city standard, but it's not going to be in as wide a right-of-way. The access easement or tract that is created within the project is wide enough for the improvement, but not as wide as a normal local street would be.
And
So that is on the applicant. We have had those conversations, and we have those conversations with the public all the time, that I appreciate that you would like the city to take over the street, but here are the things that you will have to do to allow that to happen. And it's very rare that the city will take over the maintenance and management of a previously designated private street.
And there's no way to vary the width of the street, the way Peterson Road is being varied?
The code does allow for some certain circumstances to have a narrower right-of-way that would have had to have been integral to the applicant's design. To have a very narrow local street for as many lots, that's probably going to be harder for the city engineer to support. It is in the code for up to, I think, 8 lots. You can have a narrower public street. I think the overall design of the project and the applicant would have to speak more to this aspect of it. I think the number of lots that they would lose, or the difficulty or challenge of having an assurance of getting a variance for the reduction in a local street, is probably a lot harder for a developer to take on than where we're at with our arterial streets. This is something that's known. This is something that's on our books that we know that we need to tackle. Local street right-of-way is a pretty well-established animal. So there's going to have to be a significant hardship to be able to support reducing the width of a local street.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Okay, please go ahead.
Sandy, my other question is, in a couple places in the staff report, you note that this zoning will not allow for ADUs. So what happens when the new zoning code is effective?
One of the things that will have to happen on the face of the final development plan is those specific uses will have to be listed, and an accessory dwelling unit, I'm not sure. I think there's some other follow-up questions staff is going to have about that, because the base zoning should change from RS5 to R2 with a PD overlay. I'm watching Jeff's head nod, so I'm getting it right. And in that case, an ADU may be permissible. So I think we'll have to clarify that between the preliminary and the final, whether or not it would be permissible to have one. It's not today.
So if we approve the rezoning tonight, we're saying that we agree and understand that no ADUs will be allowed in this zoning district.
I think that if that is the commission's direction, I would encourage the commission to express that as a condition, that this is approved with that restriction, that an ADU could not be added to this.
An ADU is really practical on these lots too, because we are, I want to add that the building envelopes are very tight for what's being built, and it's reduced side setback, 5-foot side setbacks. And I think with the ADUs, you have to have some sort of access, or I don't know, but basically the homes being built take up most, if not all, of the buildable area. So it reduces the chance of any of that. There might be a few of those cul-de-sac lots that are a little deeper that have a little bit of actual building envelope that could be built on, but most of the lots don't have anything. So it would be highly impractical, in my opinion.
Couldn't you have an ADU in the same structure?
Yes.
Oh,
Good.
Yeah. And okay, so there's that option. I'm picturing the add-on.
So why is it specifically noted in this report that this zoning is not going to allow ADUs? I'm a little confused by that.
We started this project quite some time ago. So that was definitely a salient fact at the time. As we have moved through, as the code has been adopted, as staff is becoming more familiar with the new code, I think it was probably less clear, and that was probably on me to not update that language in the staff report about the accessory dwelling unit, that it could be a possibility.
This project has been in the works, I think, at least from 21. I think we've had it in the office in between from when the code was actually coming through Planning Commission and on its way to City Commission. So this has been a project that's been with us for a while there. When, on April 1, when the new code becomes effective, the RS5 district will convert to R2. And at that point in time, whatever is the uses and permissions that are granted under R2 will be available to that base zoning district. However, the planned development will still have limitations in place about how things can develop, because the PD would still be in effect over the top of this. So the building envelopes and those details would still be held by the PD, even though the base underlying zoning district would convert to R2. So if the PD indicates setbacks and building footprints and details like that, that PD overlay would still contain those items and would still be held to that standard. Now, if somebody wanted to change that later on, they could apply to rezone to remove the PD overlay and just come into the R2 district at that point in time. So it would be a rezoning action to remove the PD at a future date if they so choose. But until then, that PD rides with the property as kind of the governing design document that would stay in place.
So in essence, even with the new code, there still wouldn't be any accessory dwelling units allowed if we approve it as written, unless they came back to rezone and remove the PD overlay.
Unless that was a condition included into that PD overlay, that would be the only way that would get stipulated in that. The other thing would be is if the homeowners association has a covenant and restriction in place that we would not be knowledgeable or privy to, that would be another thing that would be beyond us. But effectively is on the conversion to go into R2 is if that goes over, those uses and those permissions that are allowed in the new code would carry on from that point. Okay. So it could be possible to have an interior ADU, I would suspect. I don't have the design details of the sites in mind on that one, but it may be possible for that to be a possibility going forward, barring any kind of conflict that would come with the PD and the design aspect of it, or any of the covenants and restrictions that may be applicable.
So then I should probably know this question, but I'm not familiar enough with the case file. Does the PD in this situation, does it prohibit ADUs currently? As like if we were to approve it, is that actually in the PD? I'm just curious. And is that the intention of the applicant to do that? Do we know, or does the applicant care?
It's never come up. So,
Okay. Because I understand the idea of once it converts, it will be able to do everything under the new code. I just don't want to restrict it in some way unintentionally if the PD says something in it that would prohibit something that is now allowed under the new, when it converts. That's... It sounds like by the applicant that it's probably not a thing. I don't know.
That's probably a question we have to take a little bit of a deeper dive into, because we're hitting a very unique area in between codes and having some of those stipulations in those places. But I mean, it's, it's possible, depending upon the conditions, that yes, it may not be able to do that if it is conditioned in such a way, but I don't know that off the top of my head. That's something we'd have to look into and research more to get a definitive answer.
And no one seems particularly worried about that with this particular PD. Is that kind of correct? The applicant and others?
Correct.
Okay, just wanted.
Okay. Makes me happy.
Any other questions?
Switching gears a little bit, so I have a question for Sandy. I know when we're reviewing the variances, as noted in the staff report, one of the elements that we're supposed to pay attention to is if the variance isn't granted, would this create an unnecessary hardship on the applicant? Specifically with respect to the lot frontage variance, can you speak to your assessment as to what the unnecessary hardship is?
This is a very broad and generalized assessment, and it's more for the applicant, but there were two components that really weighed into this. One is full compliance with the lot frontage requirement will result in the loss of lots. Probably 3, possibly 4. We have granted approval of this project with really no significant hardship, that all of that constricting area occurs within the development. The lots are adequately sized. They can meet the front setback requirement with certainly adequate space. So those two things together was really where staff weighed in that would be a significant design change to the applicant were that variance to be denied. And given the history and the work on the project, given the need for lots, given the design, the work on the public improvements, this just seemed an unnecessarily high bar to ask the applicant to clear.
Yeah, and I'll just add, really, the only difference here is where normally we would have a 60-foot right-of-way, we've moved it in 5 feet on each side to a 50-foot, what we're calling an access easement. And so as those pie-shaped lots continue to pie, they just get a little narrower. So really, at the building setback, they are all the width a normal 40-foot frontage width would be.
Right, right. So I appreciate all that, and I understand the practical considerations of what has gone into this plan and how this plan is better if we allow for the variance. I'm on board with that. I think there's a lot about this application that it hits the things that we typically love, or at least we talk about loving, whether or not we always support it. But it does go to infill. It does go to new development for additional homes. I appreciate that this is a small variance. In some cases, it's a foot, or it's 6 feet, 8 feet. But I'm just from a standard and a legal perspective, I'm not buying into the argument that this is an unnecessary hardship, because it doesn't, while it does deprive the applicant of the right to have additional lots there, it doesn't deprive the applicant of the use of that property.
It's fair.
And with that view, which I think, I would like to think is the view that I would use in any other application, I do have concerns with that particular variance. I'd be inclined to vote against it, but then hope that it still passes somehow. But just knowing the charge to us as the decision-making body, and then knowing the specific criteria that we need to walk through, that's how I'm thinking about it. And I was a little surprised that the elements here were mentioned in the staff report, but at least in my review, we didn't get the fulsome analysis and assessment of those elements that I think we usually get in the staff report to help us think through those things. So I'll pause there. That's where I'm at.
Thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner.
I was going to say, and as I looked at it, one, cul-de-sacs are discouraged under the new land development code, but this isn't what we are looking at it under. But the shape of the ones on the cul-de-sac, that's what we're talking about right there. So I don't have any trouble saying, even the one that goes down to 31.87 feet or whatever it is, because of the pie shape, I didn't have any trouble with that. I thought it just seemed, I did not feel like I would be a stickler with the 40-foot, because the setback they're going to get gives them all the room in the world. So for me, even though it changed the 40-foot down to, the smallest was at 31 point whatever, because of the shape of it, I didn't have any trouble with it, and still do not have any trouble with it. I do have trouble with if we were to stipulate there could be no AD, that there could be ADUs, but they couldn't be detached. They'd have to come back in. I think there are 9 on the cul-de-sacs, not 8, if I remember. I could look and see. At least those 9 people would have plenty of room for an ADU, especially the one that's 14,000 square feet on that one. There's plenty of room. So I'd hate to see us mandate that there could be no ADUs in this. They can come back, I know, and ask to have the PD overlay removed, which would make it where they could do that. But I wouldn't feel comfortable with us saying you can have no ADUs.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas.
Just to be clear, though, we don't know that that's actually being said, right? I'm not disagreeing with like your analysis or whatever, but just to be clear, I don't believe that we know for sure that it said that the PD says no at ADUs outside of like secondary whatever buildings. Correct?
Right, it's something we have to take a look at and research to make definitive on that one.
Just
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, it's up in the air.
Okay.
still.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. If we're done with our comments and questions, are we?
Well,
Go ahead.
I just wanted to make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. So the idea really is that we're changing things because of the open space. We needed to come up with additional land for open space. And so we're kind of reconforming and making some of the lots smaller. Is that correct, basically?
Yeah, as really, it came down to design constraints with a whole lot of things, with the existing pond, with the slope, with the existing drainage way, splitting the property essentially. So good news is we stayed out of all that, sensitive land and creek, and we're able to do the preservation and all the stuff we try to do, the 20-foot landscape buffer all along Peterson and along Monterey. And so as everything gets pinched, you still want the 50 lots, and so it's kind of how the layout worked. There's a whole lot more with the street slope and this and that, but access and actual accessible recreational space, open space, and usable land. So it's just how it came to be.
Okay, great, thank you. I think I like this project, and I'm supportive of it for lots of reasons. Kind of like Commissioner Munch has said, I struggle with the variance, and there have been times in the past where I've been in favor of a project but have not been able to find that we met the variance. And I think collectively as a group, we haven't voted with that because of the struggle of the variance. I think it's something we talk about. So I'm struggling with that. I just wanted to put that on the record. I think it's a fabulous project, but I'm struggling with that aspect of it.
Got it. Thank you. Any other comments? Jeff, is this going to be 3 votes, or is this going to be?
It will be 4.
4 votes.
So you would have a vote to rezone the property, the 2 variances,
Okay.
and then a vote for the development plan.
Okay.
May I ask a question? So the vote for the development plan, we're not sure what the status is of ADUs?
Correct. I don't have an answer for you tonight on that aspect of it, because that's not something that we had really researched in depth. It's something that we would have to look into to know the full length of that answer.
I mean, just to, from my understanding, Jeff, what we're saying is if the zoning stayed RS5 plan development, ADUs are not allowed today.
Correct.
And it changes to R2. R2 comes with different things that are allowed, and so today all we know is ADUs will not be allowed. Today, the zoning.
But the preliminary development plan is the one that contains the conditions in addition to
There is
the
no
basic-
there is no condition on ADUs. It's just I think, or is that considered a condition, Sandy, that you have in here?
The Planning Commission, I believe the language is the Planning Commission has the authority to recommend, and the City Commission has the authority to approve uses within the planned development. And I think that is in Article 7. Hang on.
That's the problem.
Yeah. Okay, hold on. So, in a plan development, the Planning Commission shall recommend and the City Commission shall approve a list of uses allowed in a PD at the time of PD preliminary approval, regardless of the fact that the approved uses may be determined by reference to a base zoning district. The list of approved uses shall be incorporated into and made a condition of the PD approval. We did not go into that level of detail because we were making the assumption that the uses that would be allowed would be those of the base district of the RS5. I think there is a note on the drawing about the proposed uses, which I think was detached dwelling. So the assumption was there would not be ADUs in this particular development, even when the code changes. If that is something the commission either wishes to be clarified, either you wish ADUs to be permitted when they are permitted in the base district, or if you believe that they should not be permitted in this development, this would be the time to make that recommendation, and then the city commission would approve that ultimate list.
Is that something you're interested in, Commissioner Edwards? Should I poll the commission to see if there's other interest?
I'd be interested in knowing what the applicant has to say
Go ahead.
about the ADUs.
I'm curious if this can be solved with a note on the final plat? Can it be solved with HOA guidelines as those are submitted? Is this something that,
No.
okay.
So, in response to the question that was posed, this would not be something that would be detailed, well, it would be detailed in the HOA in terms of their governance of that. In terms of the land uses, that is governed by the base zoning district and is expressed on the face of the development plan. So the question for this body is, it's not permitted today. We know that it is going to be allowed after April 1st. Question for this body is, do you believe ADUs should be allowed or should they not be allowed? You would make that recommendation as part of your action on the preliminary development plan. City Commission will take that recommendation and act on the preliminary development plan. That becomes either a note on the face of the development plan, yes, you can have them, or no, you can't. So we have clarity. And then that would be reflected again on the final development plan.
And that's why my question for the applicant is, do you care whether we say that we want to have ADUs permitted in this preliminary development plan? Does that matter to you?
No. No, I don't think the intention was ever to have ADUs, and it certainly never came up, so I would say we're indifferent.
You're indifferent?
Indifferent.
So if we include as a condition in the request, in the suggested recommendation from the Planning Commission that ADUs be permitted in the future, that's okay with you?
That would be fine.
Okay.
So
That answers my question.
so you want to say that we permit ADUs?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Is everybody on board with that?
I am.
Yeah, I think we're all on board with that. Okay. So we want to add that to to item 1, correct, Jeff? To allow ADUs.
That would be, excuse me, that would be a condition you would add to item 2.
Okay.
Before it would be for the development plan, not the variance.
Sorry, okay, got it, okay, all right. All right.
Sorry.
Oh, no, thank you. There's no need to. Can I get a motion for item 1?
I'd move that we,
I move to approve the request to rezone approximately 1.74 acres from RS10, I believe that should say, RS10 District to RS5 PD, District located at 3633 Peterson Road, based on the findings presented in the staff report and forwarding it to the City Commission with a recommendation for approval.
Do you have a second? Commissioner Thomas, thank you. Discussion. Any discussion? Okay, let's go. Motion for item number 2. Anybody want to take it?
We don't vote?
We still have a vote, sorry. All in favor of item 1? Aye. Sorry, guys.
All opposed?
All opposed? You're opposed?
Yeah.
Okay. So one opposed. All right, on to item 2. Anybody want to make a motion?
is item 2 the preliminary development
Yes,
plan?
yes.
Okay, I would move approval of the preliminary development plan with the condition that ADUs be specifically permitted. and otherwise based on the staff report.
Want to leave that thing right there along with you.
Thank you. Approval of preliminary development plan DP 241003 for Monterey Gardens at Fall Creek, a 50-lot residential development with private streets located at 3633 Peterson Road, and with the condition that accessory dwelling units be permitted within this development plan.
Is that good, Jeff? Okay, and do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion?
Thank you.
All right, vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All against?
I'm in favor of the.
Are you in favor? Okay. All right, on to the variances. Can I get a motion for variance number 1?
Peterson Road.
It's,
Is that Peterson Road?
yeah, you got it. Go ahead.
I move to approve the proposed variance from 150 feet to 100 feet to Peterson Road and approve the variance, and that's it, that one first.
All right,
Approve the proposed variance from 150 feet to 100 feet for Peterson Road.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All right, vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody against? 1 against. All right, variance number 2. Commissioner Ashworth, you want to finish?
I move to approve the variance for the reduced lot frontage from 40 feet to variable dimensions that range from 38.57 feet to 31.33 feet as shown in the preliminary development plan drawing.
Do I have a second? Commissioner Thomas, any discussion? No? All in favor? Aye. Anybody against?
I'm going to join Mr. Munch.
3 against.
Oh, was that 3?
Commissioner Hayden, Commissioner Munch, and
Oh, okay.
Commissioner
I thought I
Eldridge.
heard another hand.
So it passes, Jeff? Yes. Okay. All right. Any other items on the agenda, Jeff?
No, that was the only other item, the only miscellaneous we already talked about, which was the effective date of the Land Development Code. No other items from staff this evening.
So can I ask for a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you much.
Thank you, Jeff, Becky. Thank you, Denny. Thanks, Sandy. Thanks, Corby.